Welcome to the Secrets of Personal Injury Law with Colin Bober.
Welcome to the Secrets of Personal Injury Law with Colin Bober. Colin is a personal injury attorney who has represented over 4,000 clients with a gross settlement recovery of over $50 million. I'm your host, Abigail Vaca, and today's episode is how to handle uninsured or underinsured motorist claims in Texas. Thank you for joining us today, Colin.
Happy to be here.
So can you start us off by explaining what uninsured or underinsured motorist coverage is and how it works in Texas for personal injury claims?
So uninsured motorist coverage is easy to understand because it applies when you get hit by a driver that doesn't have an active insurance policy. A lot of times what you'll find is that when you get in an accident and you may exchange information with the other driver, they may hand you a policy, but then when the time comes to go open the claim, you find out that the policy is no longer in force, either because the policy lapsed, because they didn't make a payment, they didn't comply with the contract terms of the policy, whatever reason it is, you may actually end up with a policy in your hand, but it may not be valid. So either the client doesn't have insurance or the client did have insurance, but it's no longer active, then uninsured motorist applies to cover any damages related to any bodily injury or property damage if it's available. Underinsured motorist coverage applies when the at-fault person, your damages exceed the amount under that policy. So, for example, if you have a $30,000 policy on the defendant driver, but your medical bills exceed that $30,000, then you would use that underinsured motorist coverage to add that to the $30,000 that you already got. So you put the two policies together because technically the at-fault driver is underinsured as compared to the outstanding medical bills. So you can use your own coverage to add to the settlement total that you already got from the at-fault driver.
So what steps should a victim take immediately after an accident with an uninsured or underinsured driver to protect their rights and start the claims process?
It's the same kind of data collection information. You want to get vehicle information on the vehicle, whether it's a license plate, or if they give you a policy, it'll have the VIN number of the vehicle, so you can identify who actually owns the vehicle, because there are instances where the driver of the vehicle may not be the owner of the vehicle. And if they're two separate people, then there may be a policy in force for either one of them. So you still want to collect as much data as you can, where the accident happened, who was the driver. If you get a copy of the registration, if you exchange the data, then you can identify who those people are. If the police come out and don't let you talk to the other driver, then usually that information is on the police report, who's the owner and who's the driver, and then any pictures of the incident and things like that. It's the same data collection as it would be had the driver been insured.
That seems common sense. So how does Texas law address uninsured and underinsured motorist claims, and how do these laws impact the way an attorney handles such cases?
Well, there's a different standard in terms of an uninsured or underinsured claim in the instance of if it's a liability claim, meaning that somebody hit you and you're pursuing their policy, the claim is against the driver and they go through their insurance company for representation and things like that under a negligence standard that we've talked about in previous episodes. If the claim is an uninsured or underinsured motorist claim, it is directly dealing with the insurance company under contract law. So for instance, if the insurance company, your own insurance company, doesn't provide the benefits that you're entitled to under your own policy, then you would actually file suit against the insurance company directly for breach of contract or bad faith provisions under the Deceptive Trade Practices Act. So to sum it up, a liability claim is against the driver, and an uninsured motorist is a contract claim against the company themselves.
I see. So in situations where the at-fault driver has minimal or no insurance, what kind of compensation can victims expect to receive through their own insurance policy?
It applies the same. You would still send a demand to the insurance company under a different demand, demanding policy limits or whatever the amount is going to be based on the limits of the policy. And then if they don't comply, then you file suit against them the same way you would before. You're just suing a different person. So their policy, they're covered under the limits of the policy, which is usually the same as the liability policy of $30,000. And then that's pretty much it. They're limited to whatever coverage they have, which is why we usually advise people to carry more than the minimum because there are a lot of uninsured drivers out there. But it's the same process. You would seek treatment, you would submit a demand and negotiate the settlement with your own insurance company based on those facts.
Okay, that leaves me curious. What challenges do personal injury victims typically face when dealing with uninsured or underinsured motorist claims? And how can an attorney help overcome them?
A lot of times the insurance companies play the same games as liability carriers. If somebody else is at fault and has coverage, they determine what treatment they believe is reasonable, what is necessary, and sometimes they benchmark the bills and cut them down to what they think is necessary. But your insurance company has different obligations, particularly with Section 541 of the Texas Insurance Code, to act in good faith and act in fair dealing. And if they don't, then they can be contractually liable for excess damages. So if your own insurance company intentionally devalues your claim, then their exposure is higher for not providing the benefits that you were entitled to under the contract. So it's just a different person to pursue damages from.
Understood. Okay. So building off that point, can you share any strategies or tips for negotiating with your own insurance company when seeking compensation for injuries caused by an uninsured or underinsured driver?
I think the best strategy is knowing which coverage applies when, because if you are pursuing an underinsured motorist claim, you have to prove that the other driver was actually underinsured. So if you have $15,000 in medical bills and you get a settlement for $20,000 and you accept that, then technically the at-fault driver is not underinsured because it covered all your damages. Now, if you have $30,000 in medical bills and you have another $100,000 in future care that you're going to need in the future, then your underinsured motorist would apply. The other thing about underinsured and uninsured motorist coverage is usually the contract says that the vehicles actually have to make contact with each other. So for instance, if another driver who's uninsured swerves and causes you to take evasive action to dodge them and you hit something else, technically, depending on what the contract says, the uninsured motorist coverage doesn't apply because the vehicles didn't actually make contact. A lot of things that people don't know. So it's kind of more in detail than other policies are for liability coverage, and a lot of people don't know that, which is why it's important.
Yeah, it sounds like there are a lot of nuances there. So are there any specific legal actions or steps victims can take if their own insurance company denies or undervalues an uninsured motorist claim?
So it's the same strategy as before. You would, and that's the difference, is when you file suit against a liability carrier for somebody who is at fault because they hit you, you sue the driver and the insurance company steps in to defend that defendant driver. Whereas if you are pursuing a claim against your own insurance company, you sue the insurance company directly. So the best thing you can do is argue what their obligations are under the insurance code to be able to get the benefits that you need and advise them of what their exposure is if they don't comply. And usually that's enough to get them to get you where you need to be. But most people don't know what those legal requirements are.
I would guess not. This was all really great information. Well, Colin, thank you again. It was truly a pleasure speaking with you today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And thank you for tuning in to The Secrets of Personal Injury Law with Colin Bober. To connect with Colin and his team, visit boberlawfirm.com. And please be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review on our channel.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.